Hi, my name is Peter Larkum, and this is Mentality Meets. We're on day 100 of our lockdown of COVID-19 2020, and today I have Hope Virgo with me, the author of Stand Tall, Little Girl, and the campaigner for eating disorders and anorexia. It's going to be a fantastic session today, so I hope you enjoy it. Look after yourselves as you go on, and get help if you need to. But this is Mentality Meets. So today we have Hope Virgo with us today, which is very exciting for me. I have been following Hope. It feels like a stalker way. I didn't mean it in a kind of stalker kind of context. But I've been following Hope on Instagram and had the privilege of meeting her and getting to know her very briefly before Christmas last year. And have been kind of following her journey, reading her book, and having the opportunity now to interview her, which is very exciting for me. And so, Hope, just very quickly, just say a quick hello, so we can at least pin your video, so we know who we're talking to. So, just a quick hello.
Hi everyone. It's lovely to be here today. Thanks so much for asking me.
Pleasure. So once and again, we will just go through the general health warning for Mentality Meets, because with Mentality Meets, the idea is that we will be talking about mental health, and we don't know about you, we don't know about your history, we don't know about your personal experiences around mental health, whether you are experiencing or have experienced mental health illnesses in the past. We don't know whether you're supporting someone who is or has experienced mental health illnesses. And so just be aware of what is going on inside of you. If you find any of the stuff that we're talking about a little bit more vulnerable than you're expecting, please look for help. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. In a second, I'm going to introduce you to our chat bar, which is where I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself. You can write it all in, and we can begin to interact. But with your chat bar, you also have the ability to send me a private message. So if you are experiencing just a little bit more vulnerability than you're expecting, send me a private message, and I'll do whatever I can to try and support you as we go through this. Other options are, you can call the Samaritans on 116123. Okay, it is totally free, totally anonymous. Talk to them. Don't be afraid of it. Also, in the context of Mentality Meets, we've been promoting hubofhope.co.uk. So if you Google www.hubofhope.co.uk, you will then be sent to a website where you can put your postcode in. As you put your postcode in, it will then give you all the mental health provision in your local area, which is brilliant if you're supporting people on the other side of the country, because you can put their postcode in and get the support around their local area. There's also a text service out there called Shout, and now you can text Shout to 85258, and then somebody will get directly back in contact with you. So if you do find that any of the stuff that we're talking about resonates a little bit closer than you were expecting it to, may we just ask that you look after yourselves. So that is my health warning and my check going on and done. Now, I'd like you to give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are out there. So welcome to my chats today. I have realized I've got into a little bit of a bad habit where I've just basically been asking you for your name and where in the country you are. So I'd like to know a little bit more about you. I'm becoming increasingly aware that I look like a bear dragged through a bush backwards. So when was the last time you had a hair appointment? Got your hair coloured, got your hair cut? Because I seriously had a moment today where I thought, do I ask my wife to just have a go and see what it looks like? And then I bottled it because I didn't want to turn up on here with even more of a bear pulled through a bush backwards. So what's your name? When was the last time you had a hair appointment? Okay, I want it in weeks or days. We are on day 100 of our lockdown. So we've been in this for a while. So yeah, what's your name? When was the last time you had a haircut? And Hope, what would you like to ask our audience today?
So mine's a little bit more of a serious question. Sorry about that. And my question is, what have you done for your mental health this week? So your well-being this week?
Oh, nice. So what's your name? When was the last time you had a hair appointment? And what have you done this week, so in the last 4 days, to boost your mental health and your well-being? Okay, so on the chat bar, on your marks, get set, go. So Hope, while all this is coming through, can I ask you to give us a little bit of an introduction as to who you are and your journey and bits and pieces like that?
Yeah, so my name is Virgo, as you all know, and I am a mental health campaigner and an author. So I work kind of all over the country, doing a lot of work with schools, hospitals, and corporates, mainly talking around eating disorders, body image, and mental health. And then I also do a lot of work with the government. So I've got a campaign called Dump the Scales, which is all on changing diagnosis around eating disorders, and making sure that people can get support for an eating disorder, regardless of what size or shape they are.
Amazing. Um, and so hang on, let's go back to the hairdressing question. Matt, I'm very aware that your camera's not on with the statement that you put in on the chat, because it says I last saw my barber on the 21st of February and I and my wife have cut my hair. And so just kind of wondering whether that's a reasoning behind the no camera going on there, Matt. But you do have a very cool background. You just kind of flipped your camera on. I like it. Melissa, cut my own hair last week in isolation. Lots of early morning walks and running. Oh, hang on. That's to do with the well-being stuff. I was going, are you cutting your hair while out walking and running? That's an interesting, interesting way of doing your hair. Gillian says, my last hair appointment was 3 months ago. I've tried to cut my fringe. Did a YouTube mind body class this week, which helped me feel really, that jumped into another conversation. Really good, I think that was. Yes, really good. It jumped down to Matt's next comment, which ends with concerns. So I suddenly read it as, read this body class this week, which helped me feel really concerned. It's not kind of the best sentence going on. Channy says, gave myself a haircut last month, shaved beard off yesterday, and goes running on a regular basis. I was trying to figure out, Chandy, what was different about you this week, and it's the beard. That's what it is. Matt says, published a blog about mental health and the importance of connections during these difficult times after not attending my grandfather's funeral. Yikes. At the other end of the country due to anxiety and concerns. It's a really big one. I've had a number of conversations around that process, Matt, and really feel you on that. Helen Oxford says March, just before lockdown. Had a day off from work for mother-in-law's 80th birthday, sat in the garden, lovely sunshine, brilliant. And hi, Lisa. Heart and Ears, Shrewsbury, sorry. There's too many shrews in this sentence. Shrewsbury in Shropshire. I also can't pronounce my R's, which makes it doubly hard, because it's Shrewsbury and Shropshire. But I think the last time I had a haircut was in March the 6th. And in terms of what I did for mental health this week, I do yoga and meditation on a daily basis. Brilliant. So then, Hope, back to you. What have you done this week? Actually, no. When was the last time you got your hair done? And what have you done this week in the context of your mental health?
So I got my hair done actually just that Friday. I can't remember what day it was. The Friday before we went on to full lockdown. So my hairdresser came to my house and did my hair. And then on like the Monday when they announced proper lockdown, I was kind of like, it was probably a bit of a waste getting it done. And I have been debating whether to dye it myself again. But at the moment, I've kind of done it so that you can't actually see my roots with the way that I do my hair at the moment. So I'll probably keep doing that for the next couple of months until I'm allowed to get my hair done. And what have I done for myself this week? Good question. Yesterday, lunchtime, so I think, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will kind of relate to this, is I find when you're working at home all the time, it's quite hard sometimes to take a lunch break and to make sure you get out and about in the day. And I often feel quite guilty when I do that. But yesterday lunchtime, I actually went and just sat outside the front of my flat with a cup of tea and sat in the sunshine. And it was just so lush, actually. And it made actually set me up better for the afternoon. So I think after doing that yesterday, I'm going to try and do that a little bit more as well in the week.
No, brilliant. For me this week, I managed to get out to a National Trust. National Trusts are now on bookings only. And my sister-in-law, who's just had a new baby, was up at the crack of dawn and managed to book a family slot. So we managed to go and see grandparents and her and her daughter and me and my kids. And it was just really lovely being able to get out in the fresh air. I did feel a little bit guilty about not doing work, though. That's not good, is it? That you feel guilty not doing work when you're trying to get time off. But so, Hope, what would you like to talk about in the context of our Mentality Meet sessions today?
So I think maybe some things around eating disorders, but also thinking a little bit more about kind of conversations, how we can have those conversations. And then also a bit kind of, I guess, another sidetrack off that topic is actually thinking about the things that are coming up as lockdown starts to ease. So that pressure around weight, exercise, food, kind of how we feel about ourselves as well.
Okay. So in that case, I just want to ask you some questions because now a lot of my knowledge of you is through your book. So I have to admit, I don't know you. You're not a friend. We don't have regular conversations. So I very may well kind of put my foot in it, and I apologize in advance. Because in the context of mental health, so as a mental health first aid instructor and a mental health trainer, and I do training all over the country to lots of people. The thing which I find the hardest is starting conversations. And when you're talking about kind of someone who's showing signs and symptoms of depression or anxiety, I feel like I can kind of dive into those conversations. But when it's someone who may be struggling with eating disorders, I don't quite know how to start the conversation. And I don't even know whether there's a process inside of me which is trying to figure out, why am I even opening up this conversation? And so I wanted to ask you, is there a good way to start a conversation with someone, or do you just have to kind of crash into it a little bit? Any thoughts?
So I think with eating disorders, it's so difficult to talk about it, if I'm honest. And I think the reason for that is it's so kind of wrapped up in physical appearance. So people might not feel like they can have the conversation until that person's lost loads of weight, or until they've put on loads of weight, or until they've got other visible signs. And I think because it's got those side effects, we then get nervous saying anything because we don't want that individual to feel like we're watching them all the time. But I do really think that like kind of direct conversations are so important, and actually we shouldn't be afraid of that. And I know for me, actually, so I hid my eating disorder when I was a child for about 4 years, and then no one said anything about it until I kind of hit that 4-year marker, and my school got in touch with my mum, and it turned into like this massive issue in itself. But actually when I relapsed in 2016, actually the thing that one of my best friends did, which really took me aback that she did it actually, but her question to me was so direct. It was, are you counting your calories again? And it wasn't even like, you look like you've lost weight, you're not eating that much, like I'm worried about your exercise or anything like that. But it was just straight in there with a really direct question. And actually for me, that's just what I needed, because I couldn't lie to her. So I ended up being like, yes, I am. And then we could then move on to actually having a proper conversation about like how long it had been happening, what was going on for me, how she could support me, what support I was getting from myself. But I think it is really challenging. And the first time when I got unwell, actually, if anyone had said anything to me about that, I would have lied. I would have probably shouted and got really defensive. But I think in those situations, it is about being direct and then coming back and having that conversation kind of a couple of weeks later and checking in with that person. And yeah, we shouldn't shy away from those conversations, I don't think.
So, I mean, with that kind of direct nature, or would it be kind of a good thing to almost have some other questions, some backup questions, kind of ready to draw on? Because I get that, kind of ask that direct question and it almost is a little bit of a full stop. You have to kind of answer. But I think I would then be trying to think, like, how do I now move this conversation on? Where do I need to try and make it go? And I don't know whether that is a good way to look at it and go, right, I'm trying to get you to a place of here. And so I'm trying to lead the conversation in that way. Or do we just want to at least start that process and then just allow it to naturally unfold? Do I need to have something planned, or do we just go with the flow?
I think it's always good to have stuff planned. And even if that's like a change of conversation as well, I think always good to have those up your sleeve. But I think the reason it's good to have stuff planned, particularly with eating disorders, is a lot of people with eating disorders really struggle with the shame around it. So we're embarrassed that maybe we restrict, maybe we're embarrassed that we binge and we purge. Like, there is so much shame wrapped up in the illness in itself that as soon as someone brings that into the light, then a lot of people feel really embarrassed about their behavior. So I think in that situation, it's then like you have that direct question, and then you have the backup questions around how long it's been going on for, what are you feeling, and always remembering and reminding that person that actually the eating disorder, kind of them restricting, binging or purging or whatever kind of they're doing as a way to manage it, that is actually them managing those feelings and those emotions, and it's a secondary thing of actually what is really going on. And I think by saying that and emphasizing that, it helps that person to feel a little bit less embarrassed and a little bit less shame around actually what's going on.
I think that's really key, because the words of kind of guilt and shame are really, they're really heavy words, aren't they? They're really kind of very big emotions that people are dealing with in the context of everything else that they've got going on. And Melissa just kind of put on the chat, I've sat with many different individuals as a counsellor, and although eating disorders haven't necessarily manifested due to the physical concerns, there have been more concerns around the control, it as a control mechanism. And certainly kind of from a training perspective, I talk about eating disorders in the context of a control mechanism when there's other things out of control. Would you agree with that? Is it, and I very nearly said, is it just a, and it's not a just, is it, in any way, shape or form? Is it a control mechanism in itself, or is that, again, just another part of the much bigger jigsaw?
I think it's a bigger part of the jigsaw, and I think everyone with an eating disorder has such a unique experience of it, which again is probably why it's so difficult to have these conversations with people about it. But so for me and for people that I've spoken to about it, it becomes a control thing, so helping you to feel in control of your life, in control of things that are going on. It also helps to numb a lot of emotions that you're feeling, so things that you really don't want to feel. So my eating disorder was caused predominantly because I was sexually abused, and then kind of combining that with trying to fix every single person around me and trying to fix like my family all the time and not being able to do that. I couldn't control that, but I could control the calories and the exercise and things like that. And then at the same time, I remember when I was really unwell, like I'd be sitting upstairs kind of in bed in the evenings, and I'd listen to people arguing in my house, and as soon as I felt any kind of emotion around it, I would then start to think about food and calories and exercise. And the eating disorder just takes you out of that reality of actually what is going on around you, and it makes you get this short-term kind of validation of things, that you feel so much better in the short term that you then long for that to come back. And I think particularly actually at the moment, what I've noticed in people around me who struggle with food, but also like a little bit with myself actually right at the start of lockdown, was actually we're in this period of time where there is so much uncertainty, there's so much turmoil, and actually a lot of people with eating disorders are really struggling because that part of their brain where the eating disorder is trying to suck them back in, trying to give them that sense of control again, trying to help them to kind of not feel those emotions of like uncertainty and turmoil. And so that's what it's doing, if that makes sense. So I think it is a combination of control and numbing the emotions, but then for some people just being aware that actually it's just this massive jigsaw piece, and there's little bits that need to be worked out kind of gradually, and that can take a really long time.
I think that's so insightful. And I mean, now I don't know about other people, but through the conversations that I've had during this whole kind of lockdown process, it is impacting on everybody so dramatically differently. And I keep finding new layers of the onion from different conversations that I have, and it suddenly makes you go, oh my gosh, I've never even thought about that. And something you just said around the lockdown and eating disorders and food, just going out and buying food is a whole afternoon experience at the moment. And for somebody who is struggling with eating disorders or who has that process going on, does that make it even harder to actually just go and buy food if you are automatically kind of using the not eating food as a control mechanism? Does that then force or fuel the mechanism? Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes any sense outside of my own head.
I think it does make sense, kind of. So I think from I think having the supermarkets being like they are at the moment is really challenging in itself. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think firstly, the reality is it's harder to get hold of some foods. And that definitely was at the start of lockdown. And I think it is still an issue in certain places, is people with eating disorders have these safe foods. And when we talk about safe foods, it's basically foods that you can eat that don't make you feel guilty or frustrated or angry, or any kind of emotion, really. Just kind of foods that probably everyone else is totally okay with. As well. And actually at the start of lockdown, a lot of those foods were really difficult to get hold of, because for some people they might be, I don't know, like portion controlled stuff or tins. And that was certainly an issue. And I think the other thing that makes it harder is actually when you are really, really, or even like when you're in recovery, Chelsea, when you're really unwell, but when you are in that recovery process, you're trying to go to the shops to buy stuff, and you get there and there's a queue, and then you have more anticipation about it, and you're getting more stressed and more anxious around it. And how I think about it is actually when I'm absolutely terrified of heights. So when I go to like a theme park, when I'm queuing for a ride, I'll be literally judging like the whole makeup of that roller coaster. I'll notice where I think there's maybe like a bit of a loose bolt or something like that. And actually that's what's happening when people with eating disorders are queuing up for supermarkets. That anticipation and that fear is just increasing and increasing and increasing. And if they then get into a supermarket and they see, I don't know, like a shelf of, I don't know, tins of tuna or something, but they're tuna that's maybe not the tuna they normally get, then they will panic and they might not be able to get that food. Or they might just see one can of tuna and they will think, oh, it doesn't matter, I won't have that food, someone else can have it. So I think that definitely causes that kind of escalation. And then also I think from the other side, if you've got someone with binge eating disorder, actually they might go to the shops and feel the need to stockpile and get a little bit more stuff, but then that food is then sitting in their house, and for them it might be challenging to then not binge on it, which then again increases that whole cycle of kind of the shame and the guilt that so often comes with eating disorders.
There's so much that I'm kind of like absorbing as we go through this, and Lisa just kind of put on the chat an acknowledgement of the stuff that you've kind of gone through, and just thanks for sharing and the eloquence in which you're giving the illustrations. And she's just kind of highlighted around you saying how eating disorders may be the symptom of more underlying issues. And her question is, in order to treat the symptoms successfully, is it necessary, therefore, to look beyond what you see at that time? And is there anything you can help us just unpack in that question?
No, definitely. And I think that's a really good like point actually to emphasize. I don't know if it's a question or it's a statement, but whatever it is, it's a good point. And I agree with it, so it's fine. But I think it is so important to get to that root cause. And I think if you don't get to that root cause, I think quite often it's something that you kind of always go back to actually, and you have a tendency to go back to that. And actually I'm quite a classic example of this. So I spent a year in hospital when I was 17. And then relapsed in 2016 because my grandma passed away, and it was always the food that I went back to. But actually over the last year I've been doing a different kind of therapy. So I went back to therapy last summer, having spent 2 years going through a court case around the abuse that happened to me. And actually having that space to go do kind of trauma therapy and really talk about stuff, I'm actually probably in the best space I've ever been in my recovery, because I've got to the bottom of it and actually unearthed all of this trauma, which is something that I've never done. And I think what's really sad with eating disorder treatment with the NHS, and I'm not going to slam the NHS because it's amazing, and actually the treatment that I had in hospital was absolutely incredible and it saved my life, but actually they don't quite often push that specific trauma therapy. And for me, that's what I would have really needed to actually get to the root problem, instead of kind of spending the next 10, 11 years just functioning at a high level in recovery. And I think if you don't get to that root problem, people leave hospital or leave that treatment and they just function and they're not 100% better or 100% well.
Okay. It's probably a bigger question for 6 minutes left in our conversation to unpick. But I mean, again, kind of in the context of training, when I'm training around kind of mental health and mental health illnesses, it's very easy to have your cause and effect mindset. Something's happened and now you're experiencing this. And I know full well that that's not always the case. And I'm wanting to ask, and again, this may simply be it's different for every single person question, but with eating disorders, is there a is there a slippery slope? I don't know what language to use. Is there a slippery slope where somebody may start using the control of food intake or their eating process as a coping mechanism for uncertainty of any form? So not necessarily a trigger, but just a behavior that they get into a pattern of, that then becomes more of a need or a control element. So it then kind of builds the habitual process, and then that habitual process almost becomes slightly addictive in kind of its context. And the only context I have is me biting my nails. So I want to throw out a question right now. Anyone else bite their nails? Just quick yes or no, so as I'm not the only one on the screen. But I mean, I've been biting my nails since a teenager. Now, it was obviously a nervous reaction as a teenager, but it then created a habit and created a now lifelong thing that I do. And is that a similar process in the context of eating disorders, or would you say that actually more often than not there is a more traumatic process and the eating disorders? Does that? I have no idea if that made sense. I hope that makes sense to you, Hope.
I don't know the exact figures around that. So what % of people are more likely to get an eating disorder because of trauma or because of other like mechanisms? But there was a study done literally like years and years ago called the Minnesota study, which showed that 10 army men that they got, so 10 really physically fit guys, and they starved them for the week, and they got them to exercise, and by the end of the week the ones that they'd done that to were actually thinking like someone who had anorexia. So it definitely is something around that, and something in the fact that actually if you do it, you long for that kind of sense of achievement that it's giving you, and you get that sense of value from it. And I think we can see it in everyday life. Like all of us, when we go and do exercise, we probably get like a rush of endorphins afterwards. And if you have an eating disorder and you're obsessed with exercise, you get that rush of endorphins, but it's amplified on like this whole other level. And you might go for a run and feel great when you get back, but then you're able to switch off from it. Whereas someone with an eating disorder, if they're obsessed with exercise, we might go for a run. We then feel like we've won a gold medal. We feel incredible. And then when those endorphins rub off, we then feel guilty because we feel like we haven't done enough. And then you have to go out and do that exercise again, go running again, you come back, you get that feeling. And that's when it becomes more of an obsession as well. But I think personally, and like, I don't know 100% the science behind this, but I do think that like some people might have like a genetic predisposition to developing an eating disorder, or there might be something in us, but it is something then that triggers that to actually happen and triggers that coping mechanism. And if we're not given that space to feel heard and to feel listened to, then actually that's when we then find our own unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with it. And like for me, obviously that was in restriction and over exercise. And I think definitely with the exercise, it is still something that I have to manage and have to handle and make sure that I'm exercising for the right reasons when I do it.
Wow, thank you. And just awesomeness in what you've been talking about. So very quickly, going back, does anyone else bite their nails? We've got nose, yes, and it's an anxiety thing. No, not anymore. No, sometimes now, but always when I was a child. Chandy just goes, no. Lots of no's going on out there. And then Lisa just says, however, I do realise that when I'm doing it, it's probably because I'm stressed, which I think is also kind of another mechanism going on, and stress in itself is a horrid beast. But anyway, you know what? We're at 3:29, which means it's pretty much time for us to lock this session down anyway. And so the last thing I want to say to you, Hope, is on the news of you getting engaged, and just saying congratulations and thank you so much for your time today. I have been Peter Larkum. This has been Hope Virgo. This has been Mentality Meets, and I'd just like to encourage you all to take care. God bless, and bye-bye now. And there's our official ending. So Hope, thank you ever so much. Now, I feel like this conversation isn't finished. I've got so many other things I would love to kind of pick your brain about and talk to you about in the context of it. So when all this is done, Hope, I would love to just take you out for a coffee and try and just understand it further, because it's a minefield out there, isn't it? and just being able to have the confidence. And I think what I'm picking up from what you're saying is, don't be afraid to have the conversation and be direct if you need to be. Yeah. Is there any other specific points just to kind of finish this all off with from you?
I think just one thing, which isn't really about starting the conversation, but I think it's more just like a general observation with kind of life in society, is I do think that in society generally, we are all, not all of us, but a lot of people are really obsessed with food and calories and exercise. And we've really normalized kind of disordered eating patterns. So what I would just encourage people, I guess, is we're kind of easing out of lockdown, like just to not comment on people's weight, to not comment on what people are eating on a day-to-day basis, and just to be really mindful of those kind of diet conversations. I think particularly as people are starting to go back into the office, where there's a chance that a lot of those conversations are really amplified, and particularly if you've had an eating disorder. Like I know for me, like I do feel nervous about starting to kind of go out and about and see people again, just with the fear that people might comment on whether I've put on weight or whether I've changed or whatever it might be. So I guess, yeah, just kind of trying to get people to just think about that aspect of it.
Brilliant. Well, Hope, thank you so much. And I think it's something that, again, lots of conversations around I'm nervous about kind of eating all the chocolate, or kind of the habits that we've got into that are helping us cope as we go through. Yeah. And the impact that it has, and therefore kind of going out and seeing our friends or seeing our work colleagues. Juliet's just saying, my daughter's just been admitted into hospital for the second time, 24. So read your book, follows you on Instagram, and just saying, is there any way to get in contact if you're willing and able to? And Lisa just says, thank you so much. It's been very inspiring, amazing, and thank you for sharing. So thank you so much, Hope. I think it's probably time to call this to an end, but it's just been such an eye-opening process for me, and I really appreciate your honesty and talking so, someone put it earlier in the chat, talking so eloquently about it and so clearly about it. And so thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Are there any questions from the floor, or Hope, are you having to shoot off?
No, I'm pretty chilled.
Any questions? Are there any questions on the chat? I'm going to give it about 5 seconds just to kind of see if anything comes in. You don't have to. There's no pressure to. 5, 4, 3. Oh, we got one coming in. Joe's there going, no, hold on, it's coming through. I've just pressed it. You haven't got one. You have got one. You haven't got one. It's like, no. Yes, no. Yeah, I don't know, Joe. Joe, are we going for a question or not? No, leave me. Okay. Juliet has just said, do you feel that recovery is possible?
Good question. I think it is. I think I know some people. I know a lot of people who are 100% recovered. I think for me, I'm in what I would say is an ongoing state of recovery. So I probably have one bad day in probably every 6 months, but on those bad days, I don't restrict, I don't exercise obsessively, but I think it's more just that I'm having a bit of a bad mental health on those days. And I think it's important to make that distinction in recovery from an eating disorder, whether you're relapsing with the food or whether it is a mental health bad day, because all of us have mental health, as I'm sure everyone knows, and we all have to find a way to manage that. So in answer to your question, I think recovery is 100% possible, but it's important that you get the right support in that. And I think for your daughter particularly, actually like making sure that she's got the right therapy team around her, making sure that she can have that honest conversation with her therapy as well.
I mean, one of the things which I talk about, again, kind of in the training setting, is about good days versus bad days. And in the conversation around recovery from mental health is about accessing and being able to engage with more good days than bad.
Yeah.
And in the context of eating disorders, because there's the added dynamic of food, can you have a good day and bad food day, or a bad day and good food day? And do they kind of counteract on each other, or does one impact on the other? Does that?
Yeah, I think that
does that make sense?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does make sense. I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it. I think it does. So I think a lot of people, when they're in recovery from an eating disorder, I think a lot of people function, and I've mentioned the word functioning before, but like function at that level where they eat the same foods every day, where they're very regimented in what they're doing. And for them, that is recovery. And that is totally okay for some people. But I think for me, what I realized probably about 2 and a bit years ago now was that I was kind of functioning at that level. So I would kind of go to the same restaurants a lot of the time. I'd eat the same foods. I'd have the same alcohol, go to the gym the same amount. All of that sort of stuff was quite set in stone. And so now I challenge myself with food every day. So making myself have food that I might find a little bit harder at times, making sure that I'm not always having stuff that's portion controlled. And that means that I can have a really, really good day. But then because of the food, I could be finding it slightly harder, if that makes sense. I was trying to think, like an example maybe of this. So on last Saturday, I went out with my friends. We went and sat in the park for a friend's birthday. We were all socially distanced, just to add. But on the Sunday, I woke up and I wasn't feeling great. And I think for me, that was because I'd completely let my guard down on the Saturday and been totally relaxed around food and drinking and everything. And I think after those days, I do feel worse about myself and worse about my recovery, and the eating disorder might kind of try and be a little bit louder in my head. But actually on those days, I'm able to push through that and manage not to find the food challenging and hard. Does that make sense? So I think it's a combination of both. So you can have a good day and still struggle with food, but then also you can have a really hard day, but get through the day by having meals that you find a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And Liz has kind of put on, it's that feel the fear and do it anyway. And that's a message that's come out a couple of times during these sessions. And right, okay, now our time is 3:37. I have to jump off, I'm afraid, to another meeting. But again, thank you so much. Guys, you have all been awesome. Thanks so much for the questions, and just a lot of love going out to everyone on the chat today. So thank you very much for your engagement, your involvement. Take care. God bless.
Bye.
And bye-bye.